Lesson 6.6, the customary system. The United States is a very unusual place when it comes to their weights and measures. Almost the rest of the entire world uses the metric system to measure their weights and their distances and their volume. The metric system has so many advantages, it is ridiculous. The metric system has a ton of advantages, and that everything is base 10. No matter when you convert from the metric system, everything is simple because you simply are moving decimal points. In our system, nothing is standard. Nothing is the same. How many inches are there in a foot? How many feet are there in a yard? How many yards are there in a mile? 1,760. You see where that is a problem? 12 inches, 3 feet, 1,760 yards. I mean, like what? If you talk about in the metric system, it's how many millimeters are there in a centimeter? 10. How many centimeters are there in a decimeter? 10. How many decimeters are there in a meter? 10. How many meters are there in a decameter? 10. How many decameters are there in a hectometer? 10. How many hectometers are there in a kilometer? 10. Oh, everything's 10, right? Here we go 12 inches, 3 feet, 1,760 yards. Oh, right. How many tablespoons are there in an ounce? 2. How many ounces are there in a cup? 8. How many cups are there in a pint? 2. How many pints are there in a quart? 2. How many quarts are there in a gallon? 4. The point is that nothing is the same, right? Everything changes. You have a lot to memorize. And in this country, we're constantly teaching the metric system to the young people so that one day, maybe, we may switch over. If nothing else, we need to know what the rest of the world does. Ideally, do I wish that we use the metric system? Yeah, because it would make my life a lot easier. It would make your life a lot easier. But as it is, we are very used to the customary system, and I don't think it's going to be changed anytime soon for real. So, because of that, we need to have a good grasp of what it is in our system. Okay? So, let's talk about our customary system. Our length, I've already mentioned to you. What is the smallest unit of length that we use in our customary system? Length, like from here to there. What's the smallest unit of length that we use? The inch, right? Show me an inch. Everybody use your finger. Show me an inch. Right? An inch is about this big, right? It's about, that big. Agreed? Okay. And then, so it takes how many of these to make a foot? 12. Show me a foot. Think of a ruler, right? A ruler. That's 1 foot. How many of those does it take to make a yard? 3. Show me a yard. Right? A yardstick. My yardstick is back there on my, this yardstick. It's a big old ruler-like thing. Okay. How many yards does it take to make a mile? 1,760, right? Or you could even say 5,280 feet. But, so then that would be like how far is a mile from here? Like, is a mile from here to the home plate out there in the field? No, that's nowhere near a mile. That's probably more like 1/10 of a mile, right? So, like from here, that from here, how many times have you guys walked to BART? Have you guys walked to BART yet? We're going to walk to BART here pretty quick. You've walked to BART from here? For any reason? Here, pretty quick. We're going to be walking to BART. That is 1/2 mile. So from here to BART and back is 1 mile. When we go on a field trip, we'll be doing that. Okay? Anyway, let's talk about weight. The weight in the customary system. What is the smallest unit of weight that we use in the customary system? Do you know, Jonathan? The smallest unit of weight. What's our standard unit of weight? Like, what is the most thing we talk about most? Pounds, right? So what's the smallest? Is there anything smaller than a pound?
Milligram.
No, that's milligram. That's a metric, right? What is it, Jared?
Ounce.
Ounce, right? Ounce. How many ounces is in 1 pound? 16. Again, we're dealing with weird numbers, right? Remember, in the metric system, everything is 10. Everything's 10. In our system, a lot of things are different. There's 16 ounces in 1 pound. Can you guys, when I was having you tell me about inches and feet, I had you show me, how can you describe a pound? Like, what would a pound be? Like, how can you describe a pound? Like, what would be about a pound? A book could be. Depends on the book, right? Your math book, is that about a pound? No. Your math book would be way more than that, right? This is probably more like 4 pounds, 5 pounds. I mean, this thing's huge, right? What else? How else could you describe a pound? Yeah. No, maybe like a very baby newborn Chihuahua puppy, right? You know. What else? Sure, you saw that, right? Yeah. I would say like, have you ever seen a pound of ground beef? Okay. A pound of ground beef would be a ball of meat, maybe the size of a softball. It's probably a little bit too big, like a girl's softball. Bigger than a baseball, but smaller than like the big old huge softball. That would be like about a pound of beef. Make sense? So just think about that. You know what I mean? Like this book here is probably, I don't know, 4 pounds. So, you know, if you were to cut this thing into fourths, yeah, you need to take the weight of this. That's about right. That's about a pound. It's important that you know this so that when we're converting these things, it should make some sense to you. You know, your shoes. You know, if you were to put both your shoes, take both your shoes off and weigh them, probably about a pound. It depends on the size. Some of your shoes, right? Some of you have bigger, heavier shoes, where each shoe might be a pound. Okay. What is the next thing? See, in the metric system, you have milli, centi, deci, and then the unit, and then you have deca, hecto, and kilo, right? There's 7 different measures in every category, whether we're talking about distance, weight, or volume. There's 7 different categories. Here, with pounds, we have ounces, pounds, and then what's the next biggest thing we have? Tons, which is how many pounds? 2,000. Again, we're back to this. Remember, in the metric system, everything is base 10. Here, we have 16 ounces and 2,000 pounds. You see what I'm saying? Ours is weird. What would weigh about a ton? What might weigh about a ton? A car, a big car, right? A truck. A truck would be way more like a ton. Like my little car out there, it weighs less than a ton. I don't think it weighs 2,000 pounds. But I have a small little, small Saturn. Some of those big trucks will weigh way more than a ton. You know what I'm saying? But like a pickup, just a plain old like middle-sized pickup probably weighs about a ton. 2,000 pounds. Anyway, what about capacity? They say capacity. I say volume. What does volume even mean? What is volume?
How much an object can hold.
Right. How much can like a 3D object hold, right? Like a cup, you know what I'm saying? Like in a glass, like how much can go in there? A bathtub, a swimming pool, how much, you could even have like, what would be the volume of this remote control? In other words, how much space is there? How much space is this taking up in the air? You know what I'm saying? Like, I have a volume too. How much space am I taking up here? Agreed? Volume or capacity in our standard system, they say here the smallest one is the fluid ounce. There's less than that. You've got tablespoons, teaspoons, right? I would say our smallest is actually a teaspoon. And underneath that, you have half a teaspoon, quarter teaspoon, eighth of a teaspoon. You've seen the little tiny, your little measuring spoons at your mom and dad, your mom and dad's house, at home, where you got these little tiny ones all the way up to the big one, which is a tablespoon. Anyway, you have a question there, Don?
What category is acre?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
Unit of
We're not going to talk about that today. So our measures of capacity, the smallest one they talk about is ounces. How many ounces are there in 1 cup? You guys should know this stuff. 8. How many cups are there in a pint? 2. How many pints are there in a quart? 2. How many quarts are there in a gallon? 4. I have a feeling that before the end of the period today, I'm going to need to figure out a way to have you guys have that memorized, because you should already have that memorized. I know. You've been having that memorized since 3rd grade. You know why I know? Because I had 2 daughters who have been coming up through there, and I know that you should already have that memorized. I know. Tablespoon. Don't how much is a tablespoon? Can you envision the little tablespoon that your mom and dad use on the measuring spoons?
Yes.
Like, okay, at home, just the normal spoon that you have to eat with, right? That's a teaspoon, right? That thing is a teaspoon. Some people have really big spoons, like really big spoons. Those might be 2 teaspoons. A tablespoon's pretty big. That is kind of a mouthful. That would be a full mouthful of, like, a soup. So anyway, an ounce. An ounce is tough to measure for me to think about, because, an 8-ounce cup, the little milks you guys get at the school, at the lunch program, that little milk thing, that's 1 cup. It's kind of a little small square thing. Nope, that's a cup. And so if you were to divide that by 8, that's an ounce. So an ounce is almost like a pretty big swallow. You know what I'm talking about? Maybe it isn't quite a whole swallow, but it's an eighth of a cup. It's a fluid ounce. So we have both. We have ounces and we have fluid ounces. Yeah. Okay. And then after that we have cups, which is that little milk cart, the little milk jug the little, square milk carton. That's a cup. A pint is twice that size. So, a lot of times, you'll get a pint of like buttermilk, or, it's the bigger one, the bigger rectangular milk thing. A quart is the tall one, the tall skinny one. You know what I'm talking about? The tall skinny. And then the gallon, you've seen a gallon of milk, right, or a gallon of water?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, but we don't see that. We just pour it in and we don't ever see it. Agreed?
Yeah.
Oh, so we're talking about things we can see. Something that you need to understand. If I was to, now that we've kind of talked about this, so I know you have this down. Whenever you're going to measure something in the customary system, if I'm going to measure something, look here. Let's say that I was going to measure the edge of this table right here. What is this thing pretty close to?
Feet.
Pretty close to a yard. Would you use yards to measure this? If I wanted to know this measurement, would I use yards to measure this? Would I say? Because what if it isn't exactly a yard? Then do we talk like that? How would I measure this if I wanted to know exactly how big this is? If I want to know exactly, would I use feet? Would I actually say this is like 2.764874 feet? Is that what I would do? What would I do? How would I measure this? How do I find the exact measure? What would I use? I would use inches. You want to use a small unit to measure something bigger. You use a small unit so that you can tell more precise what it is. If I said this is about a yard, that doesn't do me any good. Does it? Is it a little bit more than a yard? A little bit less than a yard? I don't know. It's just that's difficult. You want to use a smaller unit to measure something bigger. Make sense? I would say you'd use inches for this. Now, what if I was going to talk about this? What if I said the length of this table from here to here? What would I probably use? Please raise your hand. I really don't want you to blurt it out. That's silly. What might I use here? What might I use here? You might use a yard. The problem is that is it probably going to be something about exactly a yard? No. So, like 1, 2, oh, and it's like, oh, it's 2, and there's, I don't know, you probably wouldn't, what would you probably use? You could use feet. What if you found out that, again, it ended up being, and you're like, oh, okay, it lands right here, and you're like, oh. So then what would you probably have to use again? Inches, right? Whenever you're going to measure something big, you want to use something small enough that that you can be accurate, and yet not have the number be so big that it doesn't make any sense to people. Like, for example, if I was to say, how far is it from here to home plate on the field? Would I say miles? Is that what I would measure this as? No. What do we do? From here to it's not a mile, so you certainly aren't going to use a mile if it isn't even a mile to the home plate. So then I might use yards, right? I might use yards for sure. You might use feet. Would you, even though now inches, that's small, would you use inches from here to there? No, it would be too big. People, you'd be like, how far is that? I don't even really know. Like if the answer is, like 2,465 inches, you're like, oh, okay, so does that do you any good? Is that all of a sudden now, it hasn't helped. But if you said that, oh, okay, it's about 125 yards, oh, I can wrap my brain around that. That is pretty accurate, and I can still understand what's being said. Does that make sense? If I was to ask you like how tall a tree is outside, that tree that's out in the middle of the parking lot, what am I probably going to use? Feet. Right? Let's say that there was my wife's minivan was outside. My wife's minivan. What would I use to measure that? Don't say it out loud. Think. What would I use to measure the minivan? If I was going to give somebody an accurate description as to how much my wife's minivan weighs, what am I going to use? I know you know the answer. You're done now. What am I going to use? Emily, what would you use to tell me how much my wife's minivan weighs?
A weight?
Yeah. How much does it weigh? Would you use ounces? Pounds, tons? What would you use to tell somebody accurately how much it weighs? You'd say pounds. Why wouldn't you use tons?
Because it's too big. Well, it's too small.
No. What if my wife's minivan weighs 2,107 pounds? Would you use tons? No, because it's not, like when you say, oh, it's about a ton. I mean, no, that's not accurate. How can you be pretty accurate? You'd use pounds, right? You use the next lowest measurement. You wouldn't use ounces, because again, you'd be like, what? That's too many. And now we're talking and like, now you got to do a lot of math. It's too big. Question.
Don't people when they're talking about measurements, need to differentiate between 3 feet and 7 inches?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, when you're measuring something, if it's 2,000.
You could. I understand what you're saying. You could say 1 ton and 107 pounds. You wouldn't. You'd just say pounds. I'm just being practical here. You know what I'm saying? Like you just want to use something that's a little bit lower, the lower unit, to measure something bigger so that you can be more accurate. Here we might say that this is, 7 feet 10 inches. That's fine. Feet and inches, that works. What if you were to, well, let's think about this. What if your bathtub at home? How would you measure the amount of water that could fit into your bathtub? What would you use? Would you use teaspoons? How many teaspoons of water could fit in your bathtub? No. Would you use cups? How many cups would fit in your bathtub? No. But what would you probably use, Jared?
Gallons.
I would say gallons, right? Definitely gallons. What about, let's just say that I had I had a water bottle that was like one of those weird ones you buy at Walmart. So it's not like a Coke can, it's a water bottle that you buy at Walmart, it's got a weird little spout. What are you probably going to use? If I want to know, well, somebody says, how much water can you hold there? What would you say? Would you use gallons for your water bottle? No. Teaspoons? No, probably not. Maybe cups. What would you use? I would say ounces, definitely. That's very accurate. We're very commonly using ounces in our measuring of things to drink. Okay? Do y'all understand what I'm saying? anyway. Okay, I think that I've given you enough stuff to do your homework on, I mean, it's kind of an easy assignment. So anyway, let me give you your homework. I think that you can handle it.